Before we get started on this week's episode, I just wanted to do a huge shout out to Carl and Jed, who are my first two Patreons. I cannot say how much this means to me that you're willing to help sponsor this show and help give back to our community. And if you'd like to check out what we have on offer for our Patreons, you can visit the link in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Kckid, co-host of the Forgeborn Finishing School, and you're listening to Soulbind.
You're listening to Soulbind, a new podcast about the people who play the hybrid card game SolForge Fusion and their relationship with games. I love this game, and I'm curious to find out what Ryan loves about it too. So in the next 45 minutes, we'll explore how Ryan and SolForge were first introduced, how this game has changed for him over time, and what his hopes and dreams are for the future of the world of Solace. Ryan, thank you so much for making time for this show. I really appreciate it. I know you've listened to some of my episodes, which I also want to say thank you to you for. And I'd also like to finish my trio of thanks to say thanks for playing in the SolForge tournament that we just played in, and then you took it out. So congratulations for that as well.
Thanks. Yeah, it was lovely to start the first match with you. So we had a good conversation there. And thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. And as you said, I've been a fan. It's just a different spin and a different way to enjoy SolForge. So it's been phenomenal.
I'd love to go back to the beginning for you. So are you, I guess I've talked to different categories of gamers, and I'm going to try and break it down now, but some people seem to have been lifelong gamers, like they came out of the womb ready to game, and other people, it seems to have been something they acquired later in life. So on that spectrum of like came out of the womb ready to game or, acquired it later in life, where do you fit?
Yeah, I think I would say lifelong gamer, but from kind of a different sort of an aspect. I played TCGs early. Then I kind of got out of them entirely. Did board games. I've always done video games. My brothers and I, and even my sister when we were younger, kind of always lived in a fantasy world. And so I think games are just an extension of that.
So your family was into it too. That's nice as well, because you probably have a lot of memories of playing with them when you were younger and trying to get along with them. Were you a classic kind of Monopoly household where everybody sort of got angry with each other playing the game, or were you more diplomatic?
Yeah, no, that's that's a funny point. Definitely, I would say you say Monopoly kind of family. I would say Risk kind of family. Always at war. We had the one in the family who was always blamed of cheating, which was me, and then one of my brothers as the other one. But I was the youngest, so I had to take advantages where I could see them. But it was definitely, every one of us, 4 kids, were always trying to find an angle to beat the others. And, definitely a Risk type of family.
So where does it progress from you from the sort of family games you've got in the cupboard, and how did TCGs come into it, and which ones in particular sort of were sort of steps on your journey? Yeah,
I don't even know if it was Pocket Monsters or Magic the Gathering that was like the first one. I know that I played Pokemon with my friends, that were my age, but my brothers at the time played Magic the Gathering. And, a younger brother, you always want to do what your brothers are doing. They're the coolest. They're the role model. Mm-hmm. And they would give me all their cast off cards, which was awesome. And I could play with them. And then I could take it to my friends, and I was cool by proxy because I had, the cool older game. I played Yu-Gi-Oh! For a time when I was younger. So I was kind of into all those TCGs. And then really I kind of just quit at about maybe middle school age frame. I don't know that I wouldn't say that I grew out of it. It's just my interest shifted for a time.
So when do you come back then? Like if you go off them for a while, are you focusing on other things? Where do we pick the story up again with you in games?
At middle school, then I got into World of Warcraft for about my high school years.
Nice.
And that was pretty extensive. And that I played as well with my brothers. A lot of times I think you'll find most of my game tendencies tend to follow, I would say, with my family or my brothers. And then sometimes deviates. But did that for a while, played video games. And then I got into X-Wing miniatures, Star Wars X-Wing miniatures.
I remember that one.
And that's the time where I found a game and kind of dove in wholesale, and really had a lot of fun with that. Played it about 4 years. First time I'd ever traveled around. I went to a Las Vegas Open tournament with some friends. which is interesting because that's really a precursor to like how I developed with SolForge. I think, having that opening where I found a group of friends to play X-Wing with, and then we traveled, and that just, when you travel with friends, like the bond between you, it's exponentially grown. Just kind of leaving the home state, or you know what I mean?
I completely agree. That's been my experience too. Yeah, every time I've traveled, those are the lasting memories, and it bonds me to both the game and the people in an amazing way.
Yeah, and so X-Wing kind of went through its ups and downs, and I've always been a Star Wars fan, but eventually, I just kind of fell out of the game, and I kind of come and go with hobbies, and they could be any hobby. It could be gaming, it can be camping, mountain biking, backpacking. I kind of just go all over the place. And I remember I was in a lull with hobbies, and honestly, I was actually just sitting on my computer. I don't remember what I was looking up, but one of those pop-up ads, that everybody hates.
Yeah,
it's like, hey, you might like SolForge Fusion. I was like, oh man, like I don't click pop-up ads. You're not going to get me. And it kind of kept showing up. And I said, all right, I Google what is SolForge Fusion. And I started reading about it. And TCGs have always kind of scared me since the early days, just because I know it can be a monetary investment. And so I was hesitant, but I read about the algorithmically created decks, and I said, hey, this could be a lot of fun. And you don't have to dive all the way in. I feel like you could just buy a handful of packs and give it a go. And that's what I did. I missed the Kickstarter, but doing a little online research and find that, lo and behold, there's a local tournament about 45 minutes from my house that's playing. And so I bought some decks and got a Betrayer Master, which was cool. So I slammed it together with a Master that came in the other box and went to play.
That's so fun. And especially to have that local community, that physical play was such a big part of it in your origin story. That's really cool as well. Do you have a moment, I always like asking the question, do you have a moment where you felt like you clicked with the game, or was it just like instantaneous off to the races? Carly talked about like getting her head around stealth, or do you remember there was like a moment where you like some aspect of the game really clicked for you, or was it, just a progression, or that was so long ago you can't even remember now, the game as you know it now?
Yeah, I don't think for me it's one moment, but I will share one moment. But just to finish that thought, I guess it's a progression of moments where you see something that you didn't expect, and it kind of clicks, and then you plan something to work and it doesn't work, and that helps it click, and then you plan something to work and it works. And then it clicks, and then the moment where you say, that's not going to be good. But then it's good. Like just there's a progression for me, I think. And I could pick out a lot of those moments, but I think the one that like helped me go, this is a game for you, was that very first physical tournament. First and foremost, it was all the people that were there were just phenomenal, right? Which is indicative of this game's community, which is amazing. But I said I brought that Betrayer Master, and I had a Master, and I had a Flameshaper Savant. And in my head, like I kind of did the math before ever going and said, hey, this could kind of do some fun things, I guess, but I've never really played the game. And so I get there, and I think my first match I played and it went okay. I muddled through. It didn't fire off like I wanted it to, but I was able to win the match, which first match of playing any game, you win. That feels great.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then the second match, I was against Cody, Fizzlesticks, and he had Krogius, and everybody was telling me, because they were all, so nice, and I was a new player, and they said, this is the scariest thing in the game. If it comes out on the board, you're going to lose. That's how it is. I was like, okay, well, I got to get things firing really fast. And so he was playing, and I was offsetting my Masters and taking a whole bunch of damage really early to the face. And then I got level 1 Flameshaper Savant on the board, level 2 Flameshaper Savant on the board, and just started playing mages and flopping. And I almost left his board state alone and just piled it all into this help, and was able to pull it away the turn he pulled out Krogius and threw it on the deck. And
amazing.
Yeah, a win like that, I was like, oh man, like you ride really high when you win in games like this sometimes. And so that just kind of, I guess, was a catalyst.
That sounds like an awesome start to your experience with it. You got these cool people to play with, a community that's very welcoming and inclusive for you. You are finding combos that work. When did you and Core connect as well? Because I want to kind of pick up, is that a lot later in the story that the two of you decided you wanted to do some content together, or is that sort of close to when all this is starting to go down?
Yeah, it's actually quite a bit after. So I think I started playing in October of the year the game came out, and I went just, physical events. I think there was one a month. So it was a very small thing. After the first two, maybe I found out that there was a tabletop simulator community and played a little bit there. But I would say after the first month or so, I shot my brother a link to the game and said, hey, you might be interested in this. Because we regularly talk off and on. We play other games. I guess shout out Teamfight Tactics is one that we've played on and off for a decade now. Well, League of Legends, Teamfight Tactics. And, once in a while we just get on and play. And I would mention to him, hey, SolForge Fusion is this really fun game. It's fairly new. Maybe you should give it a shot. And I remember he looked at it, looked if there was anything local, and he really didn't have anything local except for Kansas City, which was quite a ways away for him. And then, we just kind of kept playing along. And then I mentioned to him, like in January again, like, hey, you should really try this. I talked him into a tabletop simulator match. We played around and he said, yeah, I can see. He's a big board gamer too. And this game has a lot of aspects of board gaming, which makes it a lot of fun for people that come from that background. And so we get to kind of playing it. And really his first time, I think, playing it was early February. And I said, hey, there's this thing called an Ultimate Championship coming up in like 20 days or, 3 weeks. Like, I want to go. Do you want to go with me? And he said, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And that's kind of when he got into the game, which I think maybe that was end of March, but he had just missed Fuse Fest, but got into the game after. You asked when we started the content. So right after Fuse Fest, I started doing the Forgeborn Finishing School kind of solo. And then he went to the Ultimate Championship with me in March. Spoiler alert, he took it down, which was his first tournament he'd ever played in the game.
Wow, that's a good start.
Which was awesome. He did awesome there. And then it was kind of after that I said, hey, like, is this something you'd like to do with me? And he had done content for other games before, quite a lot of mobile gaming. He had been in a bit of the inner circles for mobile gaming content creation, where developers give him early access and resources. And he did a lot of cool content. So even before I started and he was barely into the game, he was my advisor, like my confidant, like, how do you do this? Should I do this? What is your advice?
That's awesome. And I just love your guys' content. It's just different from everything else that is out there, and you cover different topics and you go really in depth. And yeah, I want to thank the both of you for making that and contributing back to the community. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, it's always nice to hear, as I'm sure like when you put some love and effort into a product and someone appreciates, like that's great to hear. And I do want to give one more shout out. I mentioned playing against Fizzlesticks earlier, like Jurch and Fizzlesticks. Talk about those moments you love the game. On a whim, I asked them if they were going to Fuse Fest, and they said yes. And I said, hey, I want to go, but I don't want to drive. And total strangers, they said, jump in our car and ride with.
That's awesome.
20 plus hours in a car. And I came out of there, and Jurch is such a champion of the game. Out of the conversations we had, he looked at me and said, you have a lot of things to share. Like, you should consider creating content or doing something or sharing knowledge. And if it wasn't for that, call it like a little bit of a challenge, I also would have never jumped into it, which was, sometimes I live off a challenge. So he definitely called it out and said, you should try giving it a go.
I've been considering renaming this podcast the Jurch Podcast, because not an episode goes by where someone doesn't pay their thanks to Jurch in one way or another. So it's just nice. We're kind of telling the story of Jurch and how he's contributed so much to this game. We love you, Jurch. Thank you so much. I think this is a good time to get into part 2. So we'll just play a little bit of Sting and then we'll be back in a second. All right, part 2 is all about transformations. And we've talked about, a few of them so far along in your journey, moments where the game changed for you in one way or another. For a lot of people, this has revolved around the big events they've gone to, whether it's a Fuse Fest or an Ultimate Championship. But they could be anything, really. Can you think of a moment we haven't talked about yet so far? Could be recently, or it could be, in the distant past, where you and SolForge had a change in your relationship, a transformation?
Yeah, I guess I could name three of them, and I've briefly mentioned a couple, and then we'll let you decide where you want to go with it. Fuse Fest, that ride to and from the early Fuse Fest was pivotal. Like, that's where I went from being a casual customer of the game to, I guess, feeling like an empowered community member to take a deeper part. And honestly, that kind of led to the Digitized Dust Up charity event, I would say, and was really the original catalyst for it. A second, I would say, is the first Ultimate Championship, which I kind of mentioned I convinced my brother to join, which kind of put me in concrete, like staying in the community when one of my brothers jumped into this hobby, and then we can share it together. I knew I would be around it for a little bit longer. And then I guess the last one I would say is the departure of some of the longstanding members of the community. And it's probably relative in some degree to the Web3 announcement and how Set 3 was rolled out a little bit, how those things kind of coincided. I would say those three things have changed my outlook or participation in the game.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I want to go into depth in all of those. So let's just work our way from the beginning. Digitized Dust Up, was that the first that you mentioned? Let's talk about that for people that don't know.
The Digitized Dust Up, I kind of mentioned how Fuse Fest original started. Like, it made me feel like a member of the community, and Church and Cody said, hey, you should try to create some content, right? And then I started that content creation. Then I realized I kind of had a platform. Good, bad, or indifferent, my voice was out there.
Yeah.
And so I've always been a big believer in, you can't change all that much in this world. You're just one person. What you can do is pick something you believe in and work towards providing that thing to get better, right? Whatever it is. You can call that charity, or you can call that working on yourself. You can call that the hobbies you pick, the people you're with, kind of a philosophy. But National Alliance on Mental Illness, in my work, there's a lot of mental illness. In everybody's work, there's a lot of mental illness. And it gets a lot more gravitas and respect now, but it didn't when I was growing up. When I was growing up, you don't talk about the way you feel, the way your brain interacts with the world. If it's different from other people, that's something you just kind of bottled up. The way I approach that has changed drastically, and I wanted to give a bit to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I do regularly. But the money I would normally just set aside to donate, I would set aside to create an event that could help incentivize others to give more and try to exponentially provide a better benefit to this charity. And that's what ended up creating the Digitized Dust Up. And so we got prizes together. Greg and I kind of come up with a concept. Big thanks to all the content creators out there. What we did was we pulled them in and we auctioned off some Betrayer digitized decks, which I had been collecting over a very long period of time. And then they had to play against each other with a very specific set of rules. I won't get too in depth, but required them to play digitized and hopefully created a fun spectacle for others to take part. And as part of that, we created custom Thundersoar promos with the digitized aspect, and gave those out to anybody, not just the players that donated to the charity. And so, yeah, that's kind of a summary of it. And, it was a month long event, just a ton of fun. And thanks so much to everyone that participated, donated.
I love that you were able to do something for charity, in a charity that you believed in, or a cause or organization you believed in, but then also you were able to bring all these people together. And it was so fun listening to the various accounts on Charge Plated podcast about, and Fifth Cycle, all the excitement leading up to it, and the bidding, trying to get the decks that people wanted, and you need to support us so we get the good decks. And I think you did so much right about that. And you've really set a pretty impressive template going forward that, I'd love to do that with OzForge someday. And I would definitely take, all the steps that you took, because I think you set a really good foundation for that. So I'm going to say thank you a lot this podcast, but I'll say thank you again for that, because that's a really cool, you were the first one to do that for SolForge, and I think it'd be really good to do it again. The second transformation that you wanted to talk about was Ultimate Championships. So what can you remember about that, or what sticks, firmly in your head about that experience?
Yeah, I would say there was a little bit of good and bad. I'll talk about the bad because I think it was a little bit minor. but Stoneblade had set out an ambitious competitive circuit, which was phenomenal to see. Like as a player, you understand that typically with the health of these games, some part of that is tied to the competitive aspects. Not all of it, but there's got to be some aspect that drives people to want to acquire the things that can be strong or powerful. And it was really cool. And so we went to the first one. And it was maybe a little bit mismanaged in the beginning. There were a lot of players that had some gripes, but it was the first one. And so there were some issues with the buys. There were some issues with the handling of prizes. Nothing that was drastic. And I just mention it so that someone says it wasn't all roses and Ryan didn't talk about the bad stuff. Like, sure, there were some mismanaged things, but honestly, learning moment, Stoneblade learned from those things and slowly got better over time to some degree. So I'll throw that out there just to get it out of the way, Bryce.
I know you like a balanced perspective from listening to your content. You always like to play devil's advocate. So it's good to see you playing the same role on my show. Yeah, thanks.
Then the Ultimate Championship, there was a hugely gratifying personal aspect to me. And I mentioned it before that I was able to talk my brother into going. But from the beginning, so we went to Indianapolis, and online, there was a group of people that I think was mostly brought together by Mark, who doesn't play SolForge Fusion anymore, unfortunately. But he got a group together, put us into a group called the Tuesday Gaming Night Discord, and we would get together, play test, and continually play. And just getting together with that group, playing nonstop, getting ready for Indianapolis. And then in that group, we decided to get an Airbnb together. A bunch of people who have never met physically in person, basically. Some small group had met out at PAX East with Church and a small crew there, came back together, and we all got in this Airbnb. So my brother and I met there. And the night before, we're all just jamming SolForge Fusion, super excited, meeting new people. So a bunch of almost strangers in a room together. And even up to that point, Greg Core, my brother, was waffling on what he wanted to play, and he's play testing some decks, and he decides he's going to play the Green Blue, which was the Dark Forge Drain deck that he ended up winning with half of. And then I borrowed him a purple half of mine, and he played with it, and he's like, I think I'll just go with the blue because not that many people are going to play a Loyan. And if I get top 8, I'll get the Gizmo minions, right? Which was some aspect. And we both kind of looked at each other, and I think it clicked in both of our eyes. We're like, no, the purple half is better. So he played the purple half. And so even the night before he's waffling on the deck he wants to play, we go to the Ultimate Championship. And at that time, I think Dark Forge Drain was considered a joke. Not a single competitive player in the game, I think, actually gave it the credit it deserved. So much so that, I won't name names, but someone that sat across from Greg assumed he was playing his Cersei Forgeborn. And Greg said, Oros. The person asked him, he said, what are you doing? Why would you play that?
This is so hard to imagine because my era of gaming with SolForge is only 5 months old. And from the beginning, we've known with all the testing you guys did, Dark Forge Train is amazing. You can do amazing things with it, but it is fun to hear about a time where it was undiscovered and unknown.
Yeah. And, the meta's never solved. I love hearing, I've heard you say that. I've heard Scuba Toad say that plenty. It's never solved. You can always find something. And those are the funnest moments too. When you find something, like when Greg found this thing, he was the one to weaponize it. It was really cool. But then, to sum up that tournament, we ended up playing through the 8 rounds. He and I in the finals, which Cinderella story for me. I get a chance to take down my older brother in the limelight. Yeah. We're playing cycle 3 hits. I'm over 100 health, but that's where it goes south. He starts flipping out his Dark Forge Drains. Within 3 turns, he's able to just finish me off, take all my life to 0. And, it's a good moment to realize that winning isn't everything in these games, that sometimes when you lose, it's rewarding or more. And that was such a special moment to share where he crushed me in the finals at his first tournament with a non-meta deck at the time. And that was just like I had said before, like solidified the concrete on my feet that this was a game I was going to play for a good portion of time.
That's an awesome story. I love that. I love that you could, you've already got a relationship with your brother, but it kind of like strengthens that or shapes it in a different way. And you can have this moment together in your family. So you're going to be in each other's life forever. So, it's a cool moment for both of you. You gave me 3 breadcrumbs and we've eaten 2 of them, but the third one is some recent changes to the game for you. So I often ask like what binds you to the game. And I imagine there's a whole bunch of players, the community, that have been a big part of what's been binding you to the game. And some of those people have been leaving the game. So, what's been your reaction to that, or how have you treated that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mentioned that first time I went to play in physical play, and that small community was so inviting and amazing. And then I found the online community in Tabletop Simulator, and that community was just as amazing, which is crazy because there's people from all around the world, right? That you just don't expect to be welcomed in that fashion. And so I think after some things happen to the game, I always try to remain kind of level-headed, wait it out, see what happens. And the game continues to add amazing community members, right? Like SolForge is a huge example of that. I've got to play a handful of events there.
We love having you. You're always welcome.
Yourself, Andy, Paul, Colin, everybody, right? Like, I can't name them all, but like, it's always a good time. But also there's this moment where the people that I've been playing the game with for a year and a half or more, that I've met quite a few of them in person, some that are outside of the United States that I haven't met in person. But as they leave the game, there's a little bit of the enjoyment that just, it doesn't go away, but it changes. And I don't want to say there's like a straw on the camel's back, but at some point when you lose enough friends, you have to question and ask yourself, how much of myself can I keep investing when I keep losing pieces of it? I don't know if that makes sense, but it can be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I'm putting together something else from our conversation as well. You are somebody who doesn't necessarily get heavily attached to things. Like you are able to, in your life, move on when it's time to move on, like with different hobbies or things like that. So it fits that as strong as your connection to SolForge could be, that if enough of the foundational elements that form that relationship or that bind you to the game sort of shift, that you're not somebody who's going to keep holding on necessarily. That's just my assessment of it anyway, with the limited information you've given me so far.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. Call it not wanting to get hurt too much or whatever, but or like my wife says, like my hobby is acquiring hobbies. Mm-hmm. I'll jump into one and not solve it, but like learn everything I can about it, fully understand it, and then move on. Typically. And it's not that I never use that hobby again. It's just that it doesn't, if it invested a certain percentage of my life for 2 years, then I take 95% of the time out of that hobby and I put it into a new one while still kind of keeping a pulse on the other one to some degree. But yeah, I definitely jump into a hyperfixation from one hobby to the next.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that just continues kind of this show's exploration of different people's brains working differently. It kind of ties in actually a conversation you and I were having today about phantom decks, which are a new type of deck in SolForge Fusion that isn't permanent. And at the moment, there's no way to make it permanent. And it kind of also ties in, I ran a business for 10 years and then I decided to close it. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's horrible. That's so sad. And it's like, no, I had a good 10 years. So I enjoyed doing that. Now I want to do something else. And I don't see it that way as a sad thing that I don't run the business anymore. I did it as long as I wanted to do it. And then I stopped. And it's just reminded me as well that you went through a chapter selling SolForge as well, right? And then found that wasn't really working for you. So it's all these different chapters, right? We're trying different things. We're on life's journey. But, I like that I'm learning that about you, that you're someone who gets attached to things and then moves on. I think that's cool. I got nothing against that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And you mentioned that the opening a business and selling SolForge. That was probably one of my shortest lived hobbies, but the fastest learning moments I had thrown at me. Learn how to do all the paperwork, open a business, file taxes, purchase, sell, and that entire venture lasted less than 6 months. But it cost me a lot of money, to be real, but I wouldn't give it up for anything in the world because of what I learned in that short time frame, and which was really cool. And I guess that's why I do it, jump from one thing to the next.
I'm a big fan of lifelong learning, and I think there's probably a correlation too between people like you and me that like learning new gaming systems and like learning, new things in life. That was a really good transformation section. Thank you for being willing to share all those different things about your life where it's changed. Let's go on to a fun little section I like to call relationship test or lightning round. All right, I'm going to ask you some tough questions here, but let's get to them. And you've listened to the show, so you kind of know what I'm going to ask. I don't vary my formula that much. What is your favorite card in SolForge Fusion right now? I guess you can include set 4 cards if you want to include your own card, but I don't really know much about your card. Is that public information?
Yeah, I don't know what its ability is. I just know that I have the node in the campaign named after the card. So that if you go find the node, there's a little bit of a teaser as what part of its name is going to be. And I've seen the art and I know the faction it's going to be in. But I'm going to stick with an original SolForge Fusion, not original SolForge, but card here. Set 1, Shroudthorn Splicer. I just can't help but not play that card when I get the opportunity. And I think it's such a beautifully balanced card, and that there's times where it can feel backbreaking to your opponent. And there's times where it can feel like, that didn't do that much. And I just love that aspect about it. And that like you can, it's one of the cards that lets you play a level 2 card in the first cycle potentially. It allows you to actually pseudo removal your opponent's creatures at level 2. It just really does some cool things. And I love that card.
I'd never thought about using it as removal as level 2, but thank you for that little tip. That's interesting. I'm going to think about that. What's your most hated card? And that can be a card that you hate to get in a deck or a card that you hate to see in your opponent's deck.
Yeah, this one's easy for me. And I think people have heard me probably say it even before the Infinite Combo came out. Actually, there's a lot of cards that I can have some potential issues with, but I think Stitcher is just a card that when I see in an opponent's deck, the hair stands up on the back of my neck. When I draw it, of course, I'll play it because I'm going to play good stuff. But the idea of Stitcher has just always grated on me.
I think recursion is dangerous in most game systems and is prone to abuse. And I guess we're starting to see that a little bit in set 3 with River of Souls recursion as well. So yeah, I think they knew they were playing with fire with that one. And I guess time will tell. See what happens at Gen Con this year with the Summoning Stitcher Infinite combo. See how that goes. Do you have a favorite modifier that out of all the sets so far that you just love?
Oh,
and there's so many now as well. Even like just to cycle through them all in your brain would take a little while.
Yeah, I guess I got to go with one that's not always effective, but it's always fun to see is chaining. I can't help but love seeing, and there's a bunch of others that I could probably go into, but there's a piece of my brain that goes free and my brain starts lighting up. And that's, I have a chaining war charger in a deck that just is so much fun because when you play a spell and people look at their board state and they go, okay, that's not too bad. And then all of a sudden you drop a creature and a spell and it's just so much fun. So probably chaining.
It's a good one. And Cody was pretty similar on his love for that one. What's your most hated modifier? And there've been a common one that comes up a lot, and see if you fall in the same camp or you've got a different one.
Yeah, probably broken record, but I would say Vile. Some people would say Corrupt, but Corrupt has a lot of value in the right places, but Vile is just Vile.
Got 2 Vile creatures in my latest Hantu, and I'm starting to think, maybe at least I'm getting some damage out of it. But yeah, I'm reaching, trying to find a good benefit to that. What's your favorite Forgeborn and why?
See, all these questions are very tough. All the Forgeborns are such a blast to play, Ironbeard included. I think the obvious I have to go with is Cersei, just because I've backed her for so long. But I'll throw the second piece out there because the one I enjoy playing the most, without a doubt is Steel Rosetta. Like she is just so much fun. So I kind of two there.
That's fine. Favorite artwork, and maybe it's the artwork that's going to be on your card. Can we go delve in for a second for how did you get your face on that card? What did you win to get that? Was it the campaign note, or was it something else? What led to you getting your face on the card?
No, that is a good story. So after the Ultimate Championship Indianapolis, where I played Greg in the finals core, and he beat me, he was eligible for his art on a card. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of started his process. And then we both went to Denver to do an Ultimate Championship. And then we both ended up in the finals there as well. And I got to throw this in only for my own little bit of pride. I was able to beat him in Swiss, mm-hmm. but he still made it to the finals. I made it to the finals. And then, the loving brother he is, he says, well, I could just forfeit. And he knows that just gets me angry. And I said, no, like you're going to.
Yeah, that would rile you right up.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing, I'm sure. But so we play the finals, and like every match between those two decks, not everyone, sometimes it can be a landslide, but it comes down to the final moment. And we were within like 3 health. I remember looking at him and I said, you need 2 cards to win. I was ahead at the time, and it was cycle 4, turn 3. He was doing the math through all his cards and found the one he needed. I forget which one it was, but it allowed him to self-sacrifice, shamble some life, and then block a thing or something to that effect. And I lost by, a handful of life points there. But the gracious, the winner he is, he already had an art. He asked Stoneblade to pass that down to me. So I am the only player in SolForge Fusion to get an art modeled after me for coming in second at an Ultimate Championship twice.
Well, I love that you guys have that culture amongst you, and even in the OzForge tournament we just played in, you won, and you offered that up to somebody else. And I think it says a lot about the culture that we're helping to form for this game, that those sorts of things continue to happen. That you're trying to incentivize people having a good time and having fun, and if you don't need it, passing it along to others. I think these are awesome values we should be sort of infusing into our community at this very early stage. So yeah, good on you both. Just a couple more questions in the lightning round before I get sidetracked again. What is the favorite half deck in your collection? You've just done a filter down of your collection, so maybe this will be easier because you've already had to go through that process.
Yeah, I've had a favorite half deck many times, and kind of you talked about like my accepting of impermanence. I've sold many of my best decks many times, and so my favorite has wheedled its way down. I would say right now my favorite it's a half deck that I traded for back in set 1. I gave up a Betrayer Darkheart for, and even to this day, many people wouldn't value this deck nearly as highly as I do. But the Minion Generation package in this Utera half, it's got a Transcendent Biologist, it's got a Shroudthorn Splicer, Lycian Rain, Summoning Council.
That's pretty much all of them.
Yeah, it's called the Thorny Fishing Queens. I could pair that with anything, and it's so much fun. Like I could pair it with a Doom creature that just wants to kill things. I could, anything that buffs things, Flame Shaper Savant, even Dark Shaper Savant now. Like I just have a lot of fun with that deck. So that's, and I've had it for a long time. So I'd say that's my favorite half to own right now.
Oh, perfect. Let's definitely put that one in the show notes so people can take a look. And do you have a favorite Betrayer from your collection? For most people, they never forget their first. So is it your first Betrayer that's your favorite?
It is not, actually. My favorite Betrayer is a Fit of Rage and a Loyan.
Nice.
It's in a half deck that I have paired with probably just about everything you can imagine. And it's also one of those decks that I've had people ask me, like, when you fused this, what were you thinking you would get out of it? Like, what was the impetus? I said, well, honestly, I just like playing Steel Rosetta, and I like throwing Fit of Rage at times. Like Breakthrough on a Stick is pretty underrated. I think, like Feral Instinct has been able to just win a game in cycle 3 or 4, even though it's level 1, like it's underleveled. It's not a stat. There's, it's a keyword that doesn't matter what level your creature is. And Fit of Rage, potentially being able to do it to your whole board is just so much fun. And it's in a faction that doesn't natively have access to Breakthrough. Yeah,
that's huge. The number of times I've wanted to make my Rumble Spark have Breakthrough, but if I don't have that Fit of Rage in my Rumble half, then I can't do anything with it. So, to have it on a stick, like I can see the value in that. Well, let's go on to the final part of the show, your future together. So this will be an interesting question for you in particular with all the info you've given me so far. Where do you see this relationship with this game 2 to 5 years from now? Are we still going to have you, or are you wrapping things up now?
Yeah, 2 to 5 years is a very long time, and that's very difficult. I would say, right now, I kind of mentioned I'm in the wait and see mode, and I'm in the process of paring my collection down to a very, very, very select few decks that I would at least, I'm keeping because I would enjoy jumping in the queue and playing every now and then, or waking up and playing an SolForge tournament, or, catching the random event. Because mostly, honestly, I enjoy the sealed version of the game much more. And the $5 Phantom Sealed has been a blessing for me. I just told Church the other day, like, this series of tournaments has kept me personally playing the game even maybe longer than I thought I would. Kind of reinvigorated me to $5, I get a new booster. I don't care if I get to keep it or not. And I get to play a game and enjoy 3 games of something fairly new, and then move along. And so with all those things kind of in mind, and then you mentioned that Greg's art is coming out in set 4. My art's coming out in set 4, and Sam Nathis's art, and Steven Hellkite, his art is coming out. There's just a lot of people's art that I've been friends with for good amount of time that's coming out in set 4 that I'm super excited about. So there's an aspect of there that I know 100% for a fact when set 4 comes out, I will be dipping my toes back into the game in some way, shape, or form. So I'm kind of just in the casual enjoy mode for now. When set 4 comes out, I will be looking to either get a couple boosters or probably more secondary market, trying to acquire those named cards and go from there. 2 to 5 years, we'll see where the game's at, but hopefully, I'll just be a name you see in queue once every couple of weeks, and people don't even know who that is because I've probably been out of touch with the game for a while, but I'll still always have a pulse on it. Kind of like I said, like 95% of my attention honestly at this point is moving on out the door, but I'm still going to be around to jump in, play some games, and say hello to some friends along the way. That's the hope.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful sentiment. And I do hope that, down the line to see match with you in a queue or have you turn up to a random one of our tournaments early in the morning. That'd be great. And I want to agree with what you said about these $5 sealeds. I think that's really a good way for them to go to get people to dip their toe in the water, especially if they're worried about competitive play or, just want to have some fun. The more people I talked to that played the original SolForge, a lot of what appealed to that was the draft mode and the limited mode. So it's nice to see them sort of tying that all together and just kind of like putting their finger on the pulse about what excites people about this game. And I think there is something inherently limited, appealing about this game when you get a deck half and you can't control what goes into that. So I think they're leaning into the right area there. Just before we finish up, are there any shout outs or things you'd like to plug? I'm guessing this is a good opportunity to let people know that on Marketplace, you've got some decks up for sale. At this point, that's going to close fairly soon. But yep, I am selling mine up on the Marketplace, and it's very cheap. There's a Shambling Shambler in there, which people have bought for $100 or more alone. The current bid on it, the whole collection of 153 decks is $100. Shipping's a thing. Obviously, I'll be at Gen Con. The last thing I really want to plug, I guess, is just that there's another aspect of the game that I love that I guess I didn't get a chance to mention. And so I do want to throw it out there. And that's the storyline. And what they did at FuseFest 2 is kind of create a team aspect. And I think that's just the coolest thing they could have done. You could go a lot of ways. But getting people to band together and, agree or disagree about a cause or have some discourse and have some fun was just one of the coolest experiences in gaming I've had. And if I'm going to an event and there's a SolForge storyline event and it's 15 years from now and I haven't played the game in 5 years, I'll sign up for the storyline event. Like, I'll be there every time for that. And I'm looking forward to, I'm going to Gen Con with my brother, and I've signed up for the storyline event. I'm super excited for that. That's awesome. And I'm hoping that we can have a storyline event here in Australia one day because we've done lore events. but I think there's something really special. Every account I hear of a storyline event, it sort of means a lot to people. So yeah, it's my hope, and I'll continue to work with Church to try and bring one of those down to Australia so we can experience it for ourselves as well. This is the part of the podcast where we do the secret words. So have you given any thought to what you'd like your secret word to be this episode?
Let's go with family, because I think that encompasses my involvement with the game. And family is a very, very loose word. For me, it's not just my immediate family. It's the SolForge community has been a big part of, I would say, a family in my life for this point in time, which is great. I really appreciate everyone that's been involved. So let's do that.
Perfect. And you make me think of Fast and the Furious now, because Vin Diesel's always talking about family.
Oh, that's great. We're going to have to pull that meme up.
Yeah, we do. So just to finish off, there are lots of other good podcasts out there. Charge played a podcast that Church and Cody did together for a while, and just Church does now. That's terrific. Fifth Cycle is another terrific podcast. And then definitely go back through the back catalog of Forgeborn Finishing School. I know I have, and I've got a lot of great content from you and Greg and Core about all sorts of things, topics you've covered. So thanks again for all the content you've done, and highly recommend people check that out. OzForge, you can find a link in the show notes. That's the community I run. We run events twice a week, sometimes more. And Ryan played in one, took it out this morning. So we encourage anyone around the world to tune in if it suits your time. And this month we're doing special times to line up Australia with America and line up with Europe. So check those out. Thank you so much for being on the show, Ryan. I really enjoyed our chat together. Felt like I got to know you and your family a little bit better. And wish you all the luck for the future in whatever hobbies sort of take your fancy.
Hey, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing what you do. I'll continue to listen to these for the immediate, foreseeable future for quite some time. Like I said, this is just such a different way to enjoy a hobby that is tangentially related to the game. Like you just get to learn so many cool things about people. It really is just a beautiful project that you've done. And thanks so much.
Well, thank you for contributing to it. Thank you for listening to the Soulbind podcast. And if you're interested in helping us continue to grow the SolForge Fusion community, you can visit the link in our show notes for our Patreon.